All right, so the story behind the Beta Synt, it's a 1993, and in 2017, this thing showed up on the local Craigslist. Trials bikes are insanely rare around here. It just popped up with $500. I had just bought this house. We were basically doing demolition in order to renovate. I had no business buying anything, but I just couldn't pass up a local trials bike. It's an Italian brand. I've heard of Beta motorcycles. They still make motorcycles. I didn't figure it'd be impossible to get parts. And so I figured, as long as it's complete, I'm going to go ahead and buy it. I'm going to have me a trials bike. It's going to be very cool because it's 1993. That's not that old to an old person like me. Because it's over 25 years old, it's supposedly easier to get a title and a tag for it as an antique here in Tennessee. Not that I want to be doing big dual sport adventures on it, but it's totally cool to have a road legal bike, especially with the trailhead a couple miles away. And so I went and bought it, just basically stuck it in the shed. I actually took it camping with me one time so I could work on it a little bit, and I did have it started for about 10 seconds. So I took it apart a little bit and discovered that there was corrosion inside the engine cases. A little bit of research revealed that that is not a small problem on these bikes. It's very common. I realized that I may have made just a big mistake. And the parts, I still haven't found a workshop manual for it. That's been 5 years. I haven't found any kind of workshop manual for it. I'm just kind of freeballing on the torque specifications and stuff like that. But in any case, there's zero chance of me finding parts domestically for this thing, especially, like a whole engine or something like that. It's not as bad as some of the ones I've seen where water is actually coming out of the case where it's corroded all the way through. And I've seen one now that someone had covered in JB Weld is still just, coming out of there. This one doesn't appear to be that way, but I don't think I've ever had water in it either, so who knows. The corrosion had built up into this sticky powder and had gotten inside the water pump housing and was locking up the water pump impeller. In order to get the impeller off, the flywheel had to come off. When I put it back together the first time, I probably didn't get the flywheel tight enough and messed up the flywheel key and the keyway on the crankshaft. So again, there's another part that couldn't possibly replace locally, domestically. I found a Beta Zero's Facebook group. I started learning a little bit more about it. Found out that parts are pretty available in Europe. So, worst came to worst, I could maybe get some used parts from Europe. Kind of renewed my interest in getting it back together. And so I dug it back out. I found the flywheel key. I needed to dress the key slot in the crankshaft, and I couldn't get to it because the engine was in the frame. Then it turned out that I couldn't get the swing arm bolt out because it passes through the engine. It's aluminum, and it had corroded to the engine cases so bad that I went ahead and stripped all the tires and suspension and everything I could off of the frame. Took it to a guy's auto shop, and we pushed that swing arm bolt out with an air hammer. Of course, we ruined the swing arm bolt because it's aluminum, so that's another thing that I have to replace. And the only reason that most of this stuff came off of the frame was so that I could carry the frame and the engine by themselves and the swing arm to this shop to see if we could press that big bolt out. I was able to dress up the crankshaft, get the flywheel back on, and now I'm addressing the corrosion in the engine. It's extremely hard to start when I first got it, and that's mostly owing to this tiny little kickstarter that's on the left side. I have no real coordination for left side kicking, plus that tiny little kickstarter shaft, and there's no seat to get leverage off of. If I knew that the bike would run and not have a ton of other issues, I would be willing to spend whatever on it. At the moment, I'm just trying to get it together. It's not a restoration. I'd rather get it running than restored. I have no interest in a restored trials bike from 1993. But I am very interested in riding it. I really do want to ride it. If I had it to do over again, this is a $500 bike in West Tennessee. But I could have bought a running gas in Oklahoma probably, or somewhere like that, New Mexico, for $1,000, newer model, and have been riding a trials bike for the last 5 years. So if I had it to do over again, I would have done a little bit of research up front and gone ahead and probably bought something different. But I'll be super happy with it if it treats me right. If I haven't already explained it to death, the whole reason this bike came apart is because when I bought it, the engine cases have corroded where there's coolant water passages, and this pump here was just absolutely full of this white corrosion, and it had actually locked up the impeller here on the pump shaft, and the pump shaft was spinning inside the propeller. The impeller now is kind of wonky, but it does hold. And what I'm going to do, hopefully, is drop a set screw into the impeller. It looks like they do actually sell this thing. I found a part number for it a while back, and I meant to order it, and I never got around to it. I would prefer to drill this on the drill press, but I don't want to go through the trouble of changing up the belts so that I can get the speed lower. Wow, that does not drill easily. I've probably got a sharper drill bit, but man. Obviously I cannot afford to crack this. There it goes. Obviously I can't afford to crack this impeller, else, you know, no telling what the wait time would be on it. I guess I can turn this so the camera can see it. If they are indeed available. Alright, that just cut right in. Alright, let's see how we did. Oh wow, that's nearly... It's better. Can go a little tighter. Go in a quarter turn. Oh yeah, that's a lot better. Just a little bit of slack. Now, concentricity, it's going to be at around. There's no doubt about that. Do I care? Probably not. I am going to eventually order a new one of these, but I don't want to wait for it. In order to get the impeller out, you have to take the flywheel off, this ring that goes around the flywheel off, the cover off, and the cover for the water pump off. So I don't really want to do that if I don't have to. So we'll see if this makeshift fix holds. Of course, we're also making gaskets here, so there's no telling. It'll probably come apart again. Got the engine partially assembled with this pipe running out of the return line for the hose and the water pump cover off, open, and soaking the engine in apple cider vinegar, the insides, until it comes out of the water pump. And it's also coming out of the temperature switch up here on the head. And I've got the actual water pump housing soaking in this runoff.
You're soaking in it.
Some dual usage of that apple cider vinegar. I'm going to try my best to duplicate this water pump gasket out of the 3/64 rubber cellulose sheet. Unfortunately, the surface is just barely raised off the edge, so the corners may cut through with the hammer, but the surface area here probably will not. Alright, that took forever, but it's starting to finally cut through the gasket on this one edge. Of course, if I break this part, I'm going to be in a lot worse shape than if I just don't get a decent gasket. Alright, so I got a couple of breakthroughs. Alright, I'm going to help this out a little bit with an X-Acto knife. Stuff is more difficult to cut than I guessed. I got a ball peen hammer for the center. See if I can get down into the part here and find the hole in the center. That is working, not as fast as I thought. Still experimenting here. I'm going to try centering a socket on it, see if I can push the socket through. Well, I got a nice line. Ah, there we go. That worked out pretty well. Actually got a pretty decent relief of the outline here. Again, I don't really think it makes any difference if I actually do cut that off. New blade on the knife made a huge difference. Boom! Nailed it! Alright, so there's my Felpro pre-cut gasket. There's the original. It's pretty dang close to me. These are the worst split ring pliers ever. Harbor Freight. That is so much better. Cool.
Were you a witness to what he just did?
My plan for this, if it runs, is to just put fresh water in it, run it, and then drain it after each ride till I think it's clearing up. I'm hoping to find some kind of additive that will stop the corrosion, basically. Corrosion really isn't in the head. I mean, it was, but it doesn't seem like it's corroding in the cylinder wall. You can see the corrosion there on the head. So I think it's mostly, gosh, in the engine case itself, not in the cylinder, not in the head, just the water pump in the engine case. And then of course you can see here where that corrosion has settled in various places, which probably means there's water leaking on it too. And it also has this film that's around it that has mostly come off. It's been coming off while I worked on it. I tried to clean on it. I hate for it to come off, but it looks better off than it does cracked up. I'm leaving this, well, I was just about to say I'm going to leave as much as possible, but there I go, tearing off a big chunk of it. Don't think that's going to work. Yeah. Well, if I was giving myself advice, it would have been to run a file around the edges of this part before trying to trace it with the X-Acto, because it keeps hanging up on tiny little pieces of flashing. Ah. I'm going to try to cut the circle out of the center with the X-Acto knife using the flywheel as a guide. I may be losing the edge on this knife. Alright. Alright, I still got to find something to make the holes in the gasket. I've been all over the house, garage, looking for either something very good like some of that small brass tubing that I know I have somewhere, or just anything else to make these holes. It worked. So it's not a perfect hole. I can auger it out a little bit with the drill bit before I put it in. Let the actual bolt open it up some too. Ah, no! Massive failure. Oh, massive failure. Doggone it. Now what? Start over? Probably not. One of the main problems that I've had with this was that the flywheel key mushed on it. It like spread around the crankshaft. That's why I took it apart this far. I took all the stator out and everything. I ground it all out with a Dremel tool. I'm going to use valve grinding compound on the crankshaft and on the flywheel. The flywheel key just kind of keeps the flywheel in place. The taper is what actually locks the flywheel to the crankshaft. Valve grinding compound's also going to roughen it up a little bit and going to make it so that the flywheel seats better on there. And if you're not in the know, valve grinding compound is just like, it's like, I don't know, thick. It's like oil with grit in it. So it's sticky, but not as sticky as grease. And it's gritty, like a fine sandpaper in there. You can kind of hear that. Too many tools, not enough workspace. I'm going to lock the flywheel by tossing a wooden dowel into the ports. Top of the piston, or rather lock the piston, which will lock the flywheel. I can actually hear it scratching the surface, hopefully taking some of that surface rust off the crank. And polishing the flywheel and the crankshaft so that they'll work better. Okay, that actually looks a lot nicer in there. Didn't get the rust all the way up here on the top part of the crank, but it did take it off down here. I think I'm going to do it some more since I still see a little bit of rust. Surface rust, it's nothing to worry about. It's not like the crank's going to break off, he says. Okay. Doesn't that look a lot nicer? Alright. Gasket material from Wonder Woman's Island got here earlier than I expected, so looks like I'm going to be able to knock out this last gasket. This is a 1/64 Velcro. The original gasket looks even thinner than that. This goes on the back side of the split ring. I don't think it actually holds anything in, but keeps dirt out or whatever. So it's not critical. One thing I am going to do though is there's some casting material, and I've learned that the X-Acto gets caught up in there and these casting flaws on the inside. I'm just going to run this file in here real quick. Alright, so I just used a ball end of the Allen wrench there to burnish this into the gasket material. And then I'm going to follow the line. I don't guess I need the part to be up here, but it seems like it helps to keep my fingers on it. This cut's much easier than the thicker stuff and the blue stuff, but it does not smell good. I still need to punch out these screw holes, and I've tried several things. Still haven't found anything that will cut through them well. Speaking to a friend last night, and he recommended a punch, so I've got these cheap punches I've had forever. Looks like it bunched up the gasket material inside there. Still did not. I could use like literally one of those hole punches and just knock that out if I knew where one was. Okay. How about making your own hole punch, Brian? Didn't even need the hammer. Punched right through it. Oh yeah. Wish I had done that with the gaskets yesterday. Alright, I'm going to try to cut this gasket off with the hammer again. This time with the aluminum hammer. The material's so thin, I think it might work. I may just try to cut out the edges or just burnish it again. It would have helped a ton if I just cut some more of this off, I think. I was looking today for torque specifications on the internet and came across a site that actually sells this gasket set for 40 pounds sterling out of England. Alright, let's see how we did. Okay, well, that is not terrible. A little bit thin where I tried to use the engine cases to cut it. I need to trim that. But all in all, the original gasket wasn't that impressive to begin with. And like I say, this doesn't really hold in any liquids. It just keeps dirt out. So, I'm going to go with that. So I don't know much about the Beta motorcycle company, particularly the Beta motorcycle company in the 90s. This engine has this big spacer here that pushes the stator cover out about an inch maybe, and I'm guessing that's to cover the flywheel, and that leads me to speculate that the engine was used on something else besides the trials bike that didn't have this giant flywheel, which is not around. Nope, there it is. It didn't have this giant flywheel that sticks out so far. So they must have also had dirt bikes or something to use this same basic engine. But this spacer arrangement covers this fuel pump, or this water pump, which has been a big deal. It means that in order to get that, just the impeller out of that water pump, the entire side of the engine has to come off. Seems like. I mean, and it just barely doesn't clear. For the one of about 1/8 of an inch, that thing would come out without taking all these parts off. That's it for this video. Thanks for making it this far, and I promise that's the last of the gasket making. Please like, subscribe, comment, and whatnot.
Tappa, tappa, tappa. Tappa, tappa, tappa. Tap, tap, tap-a-roo.